You're listening to the Around the Lens podcast, the home of high-quality, roundtable, visual journalism discussion about the news, topics, and gear related to our career field. Now, here's the host of our show, David J. Murphy.
Hello and welcome to episode 232 of Around the Lens. I'm your host, David J. Murphy. Joining me this week are a whole host of full panel of visual journalists here to talk about all the stuff that's going on within the week. Just so you're aware, I'm a freelance visual journalist based out of South Korea, and Around the Lens is a weekly show where each week a group of visual journalists get together to talk about all the things going on in and around our industry. Our weekly regular panelists this week are Travis W. Keys, a freelance photographer and chairman of APA New York, based out of New York. Hello, Travis.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Not much. Are you doing all right? You survived the 4th of July weekend?
I mean, lots of fireworks. The neighbors went crazy, and all that. I think just because they couldn't go anywhere else, everybody, it seemed around me, did their own personal fireworks display for the last 3 days, so that was something else.
Smart. Joining us all the way from Hawaii, Mr. Ronald Hamilton, a broadcaster with Eagle Broadcasting Corporation, where it's, 3 a.m. or 4 a.m.?
It's currently 3 a.m. in the whole state of Hawaii there, David.
And the weather?
Okay.
Sunny and warm.
Perfect. All right. And, of course, our third regular co-host joining us all the way from Washington, D.C. is Miss Evelyn Hochstein, freelance photojournalist based out of Washington, D.C. Hello, Evelyn. How are you?
Good. Good morning, everybody. Yeah.
Good morning. Did you watch the fireworks and festivities that they had on the mall? Did they have that?
I survived using a tripod. We can talk about that another time. It was a very terrifying event for me, but
oh my gosh.
I do the feature stuff. I had to get the tripod out and shoot with a 15-second exposure. It's super stressful. It worked
oh my goodness. Well, at least nothing happened bad to you. Like our guest panelist this week, our first guest panelist this week, joining us is Miss Andrea Hernández. She's a Venezuelan photojournalist and National Geographic explorer based out of Caracas. Hello, Andrea.
Hi, thanks for having me here. Hi, everyone.
So great to have you. Always great to get the international perspective on things. Where is Caracas located, for those who aren't geographically inclined?
It's in the north of South America, part of the Caribbean and South America.
Okay, great. Well, that's not a bad place to be, I gotta think, right? Weather must be pretty nice right now, right?
It is wonderful.
Okay, great. And joining us, returning co-host, guest, is coming back for his 4th time, Mr. Noah Berger. Hello, Noah.
Good morning. Hey, guys.
Hi.
All right, guests and co-hosts and everyone else in between. Let's get on with the show and start talking about the topics that we're going to talk about this week. Our first one is about Fuji. They have unveiled plans to make their ambassador program more diverse and inclusive. And, we've seen this a lot going on within the industry. I think Canon announced recently that they are removing the terms master and slave from their lexicon for use in their flashes. And so, this is just sort of the continued progress and reaction that's occurring, with regard to the goings-on and the protests that are taking place. I think at any time an industry or organization chooses to diversify, it's not a bad thing. But I'll throw it over to, of course, as we always do, our guest. So, Andrea, if you're there, what are your thoughts on Fuji's decision to expand their ambassador program? Do you think it's a good move?
I think it's a good move. I think it was a long time coming. Sorry, and I have some friends, and they were actually talking to me about that a year ago. That they would like for it to be more women and for it to be more diverse, etc.
You'd think
I'm looking at the
Nikon's disaster, they would, kind of get the crew to diversify, right? Their ambassador programs. Yeah, sorry.
You'd think that. You'd think that, but it's not automatic, I would think, for everyone. But looking at this cast of crew, here for the ex-photographers, look at this. It's so diverse. You've got somebody with black hair, somebody with red hair. men, women. I mean, this is such a diverse crew. No, I'm kidding. This is extremely white, and mostly male. So it is a long overdue step. Do any of you have any associations with any organizations? Like, are you any part of any organization? You know, in terms of like one of their special people.
Ambassador?
What do you mean?
Like an ambassador or a traveler of light or a master of light or whatever they call their individual programs. Any of you guys? No one is part of that. What's that?
I'm one of Jerry's kids. That's the only.
Jerry's kids?
Yes. No.
You're all part of the exclusive group of Around the Lens panelists, so that's the feather in your cap. Noah, what are your thoughts on Fuji's decision here?
I think that's awesome. If there's any downside to diversifying your ambassador list.
Agreed.
What I think is also good is not only are they diversifying it, but they're making the process of becoming one more transparent. Because I think that's something that a lot of us, you know, whoever have looked at these programs have thought, how do I become a member of these programs? You know, like what's the sort of steps here? And so they planned it out. You start like sort of a low level associate, and then you move on to like a partner, and then you become like an ambassador. So that's pretty much, you know, how you kind of roll into that group. So it's good to see that them sort of tearing down the walls and kind of showing sort of what goes on behind the scenes and making it, you know, less mysterious. What do you shoot with, Andrea?
I shoot sometimes with a Fuji X100F when I need to go to
okay.
places that cameras aren't very welcome, or if I need to be discreet. And I also shoot with a Canon Mark III and analog photography with a Mamiya RZ67 and a Mamiya C330. Yeah.
Okay, great. That is a diverse and eclectic group of cameras there. Good that you shoot with the Fuji, so maybe you're one of the ones they'll choose to be part of their Visionaries ambassador programs going forward. I think we were talking last week. Ron, didn't you say that you were switching over to Fuji?
Yeah, I did, Dave. It's because of Andrea. I have to admit it.
Okay.
She has
Wow, that was fast.
Yeah, we talk offline. But you know, I looked at the program and it says to be the highest level of the Fuji ambassador, whatever it was, you had to use only Fuji film cameras and only Fuji film lenses.
Is that true?
So yeah, that was in the there's three levels. There was the
that's usually
entry
the
level.
case with a lot of the masters of light or the Sony Artisans or Fuji. Yeah, that's usually the case.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I've got
in the name of
my Fuji, I'm ready. in August when they open up, I'm gonna show them this and.
Well, Ron, I don't want to break it to you, but you might not have as good a chance to become one of their ambassadors as you previously could. Just letting you know. Don't you know? I think one of you had mentioned that it's good to see this program and other companies like Nikon have had their own debacles with these types of programs and not being diverse. I think Evelyn, you mentioned Nikon, was it? Mm-hmm. Or was it? Yeah. So I remember that was something. I think it was Nikon Asia. Was very lacked diversity, so that was something where, again, we're starting to see this on a larger scale. Let me throw to you in the name of sort of transparency, Travis. Do you know the process for what's the Sony program?
So Sony has a couple different programs. Sony has the Sony Artisans, and they have the Collective. And about 2 years ago, they also started the Alpha Female program. The Alpha Female program was really an incredible step, and the Alpha Collective has been very, very diverse in terms of who it represents, in terms of all over the world and the types of photography it has. The Sony Artisan program is getting more diverse, and it started, they only wanted like 16, and now it's up to like 80 artisans. So they're trying to revamp that as it is, but there's the process is changing, and I think because of this dialogue and certainly Fuji, a lot of programs have Nikon was really kind of just crazy in terms of when they put out that ad and it was all male of their ambassadors, and then they realized there was no females in the picture and all that kind of stuff. So at this point, I think because of this open dialogue we're having, we have to stop shaming these companies, and if they are taking the right steps, applaud them for doing it, because at this point, yes, if they did stuff in the past, that's terrible. But if this is the kind of time where it's a new, frontier and time to really kind of have these conversations and open up new programs and applaud people for their doing it. And you kind of have to weigh it. Are they doing it just because of, and if it feels fake, like someone trying to sell you like a used car, or if they're actually trying to make the proper steps and do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Travis, you and Evelyn both have something in common, that you're both part of organizations, or whether you lead organizations, APA, WPAL. Throw it over to you, Evelyn. Is there any sort of need or push for diversity amongst your organization that you're aware of? I mean, obviously from the member level, not from the leadership level, but I mean, do you see that, or do you think that's something that WPAL is looking to do within women photographers?
I think WPAL has certainly, this has been on the radar for several years, and I know that it's a big part of all of our programming. So, I mean, I can speak from the leadership side, but certainly when we have events, or whether they're like educational, memberly quarterlies, or bigger events like portfolio review, it's absolutely part of the mix. And I would say that we have a really high level of diversity, and it's not just to be diverse, but there are so many talented photographers from all backgrounds that they should be included and not be sort of forgotten. And I mean, obviously people like Brent Lewis of the New York Times, who started Diversify Photo, he comes to our event, but I mean he has created a whole group and collective for that purpose. But I think WPAL generally is very mindful of being a diverse collective. So I think we're doing a good job. You can probably always, do better. And I think we do have voices that probably say, hey, you can think about this, or, even changing our language to include not just women photographers, but people who identify as being female. I mean, we even made that change a couple years ago. So I'd like to say that we're on top of this, but I think as women, we probably need to be the leaders in this, and we can't be exclusionary in our own organization that's like looking to promote, diversity. So I'm pretty proud of what we've done, but I'm not going to say that we can't improve, and I'm not on the leadership now. So let's get our new president on sometime. Yeah, I'll try to. She would be a great asset, actually, to talk about this, and she's a person.
Oh, yeah, who is the new president?
Well, she's not new. She came on, I think, last year, but her name's Charisse May, and she's doing incredible work in DC, and she's a person of color, and she's our first, I guess, WPAL. I don't know the whole history of WPAL, but as far as I know, the first African American president that we've had. So I think she'd be a great voice. So
get her on. Absolutely, I'm all for that. Within APA, is there any push for diversity? Explicitly, or is it just sort of?
No, I mean, we've always had the conversation, but it was a different type of conversation, and the gravity of it was a little different. So whereas we're always trying to program to different sex and parts of the community, now that we're openly trying to find out how we continue and promote the dialogue. I certainly know we discussed the Artist Bill of Rights last week. It's something that we've read deeply and kind of considered. But the conversations we're having on a national level and a local level are very different, I think. And it's not just you can't be just accepting. You have to fight for and fight with and stand next to and be an advocate for and allow people to have a safe space and feel welcome. So all of this has to be kind of included into the organization, and it can't just be like, oh no, we represent photographers, because it's nice to say, but then you're not really making that certain groups feel welcome, whether it be the gay, the trans, the Asian, a black. You really kind of have to kind of dive into those and find why they aren't there and why they don't feel accepted into your groups. Because if they walk in and like, well, I felt underrepresented, I felt no one was really kind of approaching me. Mm-hmm. You really kind of have to really re-question your whole organization and figure out, how do I adapt it to make everybody feel inclusive and welcome.
Yeah, well, that's good. Any other panelists have any experiences with organizations that you're a part of and sort of diversity within those organizations?
Yeah.
Tell us, Andrea.
So there's a women photograph chapter in Caracas, and my friend Adriana Loureiro and I are the leaders of it. So we're trying to be more diverse, but not in a racial sense, because it's not the same issue as the U.S. There is an issue, but it's not the same.
Right.
of representation. And but it's about political diversity, because this is a very polarized society. So I'm trying to get people from, I mean, I'm not a militant, like I don't belong to any party, because I'm a journalist and I have to be opposition of the opposition and opposition of the government. So, but some photographers are sort of, they sympathize with X or the government or the opposition, and we want people that sympathize with the government to also be part of the organization, because there's very little people that are, you know. So we want to be diverse in that
Women
sense.
Photograph is a great organization. It's how I found about you and your work, and it's how I found about the majority of people coming on the show. And so, great organization, a lot of awesome women photographers on there. Great to see it being promoted, and also promoting great work by great women. How about you, Noah? Any organizations you're affiliated with?
Very few. No, I don't think I'm in any organization. Although I'm in one less this week than last week.
Yeah, we will talk about that in a minute for sure. That's definitely a hot topic. Yeah, want to get your take on that.
No, I'm not in anything else.
My Skype cut out. I would love to talk about that with you, Noah. But back to what Andrea said about including like diverse political opinions. I think that's really probably difficult and very admirable, because certainly what I'm seeing in DC covering the protests is differing opinions about there's it could be a statue, or it could be not so much the president. I'm not even going to say that, but like, for example, there's one statue in DC that is not like it's the Abraham Lincoln Emancipation Memorial, but not to get into all the details, but there have been many historians and African Americans who've come out to speak in favor of the statue, but I would say the majority of people who are out of the protest are against keeping the statue. But what happens is people are so impassioned that they can't hear each other's sides. Like, there's no room for discussion. There's no room for diversity of opinion. And I find that sometimes that's troubling to me, because I think every free speech needs to be protected no matter what. And I hate when I see these protests devolve into just completely shutting down one side or the other. I've even seen it between ageism. Like, young people leading the protest want to call out the older people who are at the protest who have differing opinions. So actually, I really applaud that, because I think we are devolving into a way where, we're so polarized on every level in society. So diversity of political opinions is like a refreshing, it's really like a challenge. So good, I that's amazing, but it's also would be refreshing. I mean, you can't imagine putting like a Fox News reporter and a CNN news reporter in like the same group, things like that would seem, challenging these days. Anyway, I think
definitely a very valid and relevant topic. And we'll talk about that in our second topic, definitely, and get Noah's opinion on the Bill of Rights in a minute. I just want to make sure there's no other points anyone wants to bring up about diversity or the Fujifilm topic before we do so. Ron, you got any last words, any points of wisdom for us before we move on?
I'm a minority in my organization.
There you go. So you're the diversity hire for your organization, right?
I do.
There's, I think, about 3 white guys in my news
there you go.
Organization. I know 2 of them. I don't know if there's 3. There may be 3, but I know there's 2.
In Hawaii,
me and another guy
around the world.
No, sir. One's in Canada. I'm in Hawaii, and those are the 2 I know. I think there might be another guy somewhere. I don't know where he's at.
Would you ever
I might be
consider
wrong
moving
too.
to the Philippines to work on your network in the Philippines?
That's later on down the road.
That's your retirement plan. There you go. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our second topic of the evening, and kind of go on sort of our main focus as to why you came on the program. Obviously, we want to talk about all the things, but you had some very strong opinions about the Photo Bill of Rights. We talked about that last week. Obviously, I would have loved to have had you on last week, so you and Travis, Zach could spar head to head, and it would be just great podcast material. But it's okay. You can be here, and you can call out Zach and have your voice be heard. So let's talk about just a refresher. Photo Bill of Rights, created by a a collective of various organizations, essentially to outline sort of basic rights that photographers should have. Photojournalists, lens workers, I believe is what we're called now, lens workers. And, for the most part, I think the majority of us didn't really see too much of an issue with it until it came to their templates and their sort of working tools. And there's like this script where they want you to explain in detail to the person you're photographing and get their consent and all kinds of fun stuff like that. So Noah, I think that's where we start with you. So kind of give us your thoughts on it.
I know you did it last week, so don't want to monopolize that. I heard Travis did a good job sticking up for the anti-BOR. Was that right?
He flipped
or
the
somebody
table.
Else was Zach Spark?
Travis is
What's that?
But
I think the thing is a travesty in terms of photojournalists, and I'm not even talking about the toolkits. That entire document is a shit show that should not exist for photojournalists or news workers or NPPA members. From the first sentence, the whole thing bothers me. I'm not even talking about the consent, which is way over.
I did not stick up for it, and let's loosely use that word travesty. Okay, watch that.
Travesty, yeah, I like that.
But no, I actually had a lot of fundamental problems with it in terms of I think it's a fad of the moment. There was no, there's nothing that ties people in or responsibility or follow up or it seems like, well, if I sign it, no one's going to check that I signed it. Nobody's going to follow up or that I'm running it. And I think there's some inherent problems with the way it's written and some of the stuff that it ties us to and some outlandish stuff that's just not practical. But I think it's nice as a beginning conversation, but it needs to be something that we consistently, and this goes back to what we were talking about with Fuji diversifying and with the Bill of Rights. If this is not something that becomes not just the fad of the moment, that we need to constantly fight for as organizations and change the whole atmosphere and culture, consistently follow up on that, there's nothing that's it's just not important.
Well, I'll go further. I think it's a disgusting piece of something for a news shooter to sign. If you're not a news shooter, if you're a documentary photographer or street photographer, no issue, it's fine. But for NPPA to put their name behind this, and for honestly, I'm trying not to make it personal about people because there are a lot of people I like and respect who've signed it, but no news photographer should be on that list. You're coming out as I'm a far left Democrat. I stand with BLM. I stand with protesters. I stand with the Sodom covering. All of it. The language in there, a lot of it I find offensive, completely uninclusive. Much less, I don't really state where my politics are because I'm a news photographer, but imagine somebody who's not even a Democrat, how you would feel about this. This is insane. So I think it's horrible that NPPA is involved in this. I think it's unethical.
I think a lot of people were quick to jump on and try and just do the right thing and not really kind of dive into it. I know when we kind of under American Photographic Artists, when we started to read it, we read it all individually. Then we kind of group talked about it. Then we sent it over to the lawyers for their input and stuff like that. So we had a long discussion of it. It wasn't like, yes, Bill of Rights, we have to sign that, and not really kind of dive into it. So we kind of really looked into it very closely and decided, it was an individual thing and not an organizational thing to this. And I certainly voiced my opinion. I would not be signing it.
So your basic disagreement with the concept of the program is it's too left-leaning and it tends to apply a certain bias if you sign it or associate yourself with it, and we as news photojournalists shouldn't have any sort of bias, right?
I have so many different beefs. That's the first one, is that it says we stand with this movement that we're covering would be the first one. That's the first sentence in there. The phrase cis male gaze, I'm not on board for. I think that's discounting people who've worked for the industry. Not on board for that. Pulling it up here. All the language just aligns yourself with the far left. All those phrases that are used are coming out and saying, hi, I'm far left. And these are not inclusive phrases. They're not things that photographers should even, it's not even related to improving our industry. These are, I honestly think the people who wrote this just wanted to say, we're left, we stand with black people. I think that's what this was meant for, more than an honest attempt to improve the industry. The consent thing is a whole nother thing, and the talk that it's in the toolkit I find irrelevant, but it's weakening press freedom. It's starting to. We see that in protesters. It's under attack. Consent is a non-starter for me. Yeah, I think it's disgusting, honestly. There was one other. I just forgot. Sorry, I'm not going on a lot of sleep.
Yes, a couple hours.
Otherwise,
I mean, obviously, I know you disagree with the sort of, obviously, that part of the Bill of Rights, but are there any parts of it that, in terms of just collecting sort of some good ideas together, do you see that as like, for instance, something like the health and safety and the finance and grievance and stuff like that? Do you think those are also politically tainted, or do you think that some of those ideas might have merit in sort of a non-politically charged document?
I think this is a circle jerk. I think it's not going to have any effect because you need newspapers to sign on, or your editorial outlets to sign on to improve things. And I don't think there's budget for that right now. I don't think there's, you're watching staffs get cut and furloughed, and workers have their hours cut. I just don't think that this is the time. I don't think there's a movement for that from newspapers, and having a bunch of photographers say that we stand behind that, it's kind of nothing.
Yeah, I agree with Noah on that point. I certainly felt like the onus of all of these issues should be taken on by editors and powers that be. It's like putting the responsibility to, get better wages or PPE or all of these things, like, on us, the photographers, to sign on. I mean, until editors and management sign on to something like this, we, great, but we don't really have the collective power to do these things. And I wish we did, but it's extremely frustrating. Yeah. So for me, that was a kind of useless. It felt useless. Like, let the MPPA target management to improve their hiring and their diversity, all of these issues. It was like, you're a freelance photographer, you should be doing X, Y, and Z. I mean, that was a lot of responsibility.
And one more thought on this. I've had a lot of debates with photographers over this, and I hear a lot of people say, well, it doesn't exactly, I'm not on board for everything it says, but I'm on board for the spirit, and that's why I signed. And it's like, dude, you buy a house like that? You buy a house where, it's says some amounts that you're not going to pay, but some amounts you are going to pay. Like, no, you put your name to what those words are. And I find it that people have vacated their responsibilities of putting their name to something by saying, oh, I like the spirit, but not the exact words. Right. I could not be more upset about this. I think it's horrible.
I think it should be used as an opening volley for discussion, and should be analyzed, because there's multiple sides of this, and I think it's just the first kind of step into something. But when you have something that's this important, you can't just quickly write this up and sign it. And this is a huge conversation to have, and it's how we kind of relay the frontier and as pioneers for the new generation of photography and acceptance. And it's going to take some time to develop that.
Andrea, did women photographs get on board with it?
I think they were one of the developers of it. Like, I think it was developed in conjunction with them.
Yeah.
They were.
Yeah. Daniela Saltzman is very into it, and I don't know if Mallory Benedict, she's an editor at Nat Geo. I don't know if she's onto it, but I'm sure she's on board because Daniela is, and the whole organization.
So let me ask you then, Andrea, what are your thoughts on the Photo Bill of Rights, or what do you know about it, and what are your thoughts about Women Photograph as an organization sort of backing it?
I mean, I love Women Photograph. I think it's a very rich database of women photographers all over the world. More than 1,000 women photographers are included there, and it's easier for editors now to hire other women photographers thanks to that organization. I don't know that much about the Photo Bill of Rights. I think it's meant to be a guideline, maybe, but yeah, I really, honestly, I don't know that much about it. I just know it's happening, and
well, let me ask you this: since Noah obviously took the drastic step of canceling his NPPA membership because of their association with this, would either you, Andrea, or Evelyn, would either of you leave an organization, whether it was this or something else? Is there something your organization could do that would spur you to leave it for taking a stance on something officially, some organization you associate with? Whether
I mean, I as strongly as Noah did against this Bill of Rights, perhaps, if I felt like it was detrimental. But like, this is a guideline, and I think it's a good, like Travis mentioned, good, opening volley for discussion. And these are issues that need to be discussed and addressed. And I may not agree with everything in the Photo Bill of Rights, but I do think there are certainly many valuable elements to it. So it would have to be much more drastic, I think, for me. And I think I would like to be part of an organization where I could raise my voice and express my, concerns or dismay, and maybe then, if other people were in agreement, we could discuss it. And I think that's the beauty of being in a sort of a democratic organization. I don't mean Democrats like the political party. I mean like sense of word, but things are so fraught these days. So, but yeah, I don't know. I haven't felt compelled like that strongly, to lead an organization. And I think I'd like to raise my hand and make my points heard first before.
Andrea?
I did. No,
I agree.
I did try that. Nobody really responded to.
Yeah. And that's your, I mean, it may, I love, there's so many wonderful things about the MPPA, but if you do feel, being a paying member of an organization also, that may hit them harder than just like, okay, I'm a member of WPAL by default. I basically live in the Washington. I mean, you do have to join, but I live in DC. It's not a dues paying organization, but if dues payers are up in arms, that could actually have an impact. And I don't know how many people Noah dropped out, but I bet NPPA is reconsidering. I don't reconsidering, but they must be hearing some voices.
Questioning.
And questioning. I can't imagine that they aren't. And maybe the majority loves it, and if they're not going to change. And maybe, you're the outlier. I'm not really sure.
Have you seen any response to your sort of departure from NPPA, either from the NPPA organization heads as a whole or other photographers who've left because of your departure?
It's kind of hard to tell. I got some kind of emails from them about it, like for some kind of vague, like, sorry to see you go, or
don't let the door hit you on the way out.
We've done so much for you. Yeah, or another one that said we've done so much for you, like we aren't happy that you're going to organize anything against it. And I'm like, I love you guys too. It has nothing to do with that.
Well, that would be great if they sent you that, Noah. That's like, okay, they heard you, and you could
send that. That was one of the emails. Yeah. To me, just one last thing. Like, it wasn't even a choice. I didn't quit in protest. I quit because I can't belong to an organization that signs that document anymore as if they endorsed Joe Biden for president. Like, it wasn't even a choice. I didn't quit because, I wanted to have a big effect. I just can't belong to something that does that.
Do you think these organizations should have put out like a call to their members to vote on signing this?
100%. And what is bothering me? I've heard, you hear a lot of high-profile people have quit, but staffers are staying really quiet on this, which I find discouraging because I don't think there are too many staffers who are on board for this. And editors, I'd love to hear an editor say, we can't put you on a protest if you sign this, which is what I would do as an editor. So it is disappointing that you're not hearing from more staffers, although you are hearing from some big names who are unhappy about it.
I definitely think.
I mean,
going back to what you're saying about staffers, and kind of also reminds me of what Zach said last week about his sort of activist stance on a lot of his work, and that's kind of something that I think when you're going out to cover these protests or any news story, if you're taking a stance, if you're, obscuring people's faces, if you're not shooting at certain angles, if you're choosing to highlight one side over the other side, you're completely biased. You're no longer an independent photojournalist. You're basically a corporate photographer working for one side or the other, and I don't think you can do this job and be that way. Let me throw it over to you, Ron. I just saw that Eagle Broadcasting is a signatory on this, and so I wanted to get your thoughts. Are you planning to leave Eagle Broadcasting? No, I'm just kidding. They didn't sign, but that'd be funny if they did.
They did not sign.
You don't care about LGBTQIA plus people?
Yeah. Everybody cares about the LGBT, so on and so forth. Uh, uh, I was talking to Noah about this earlier. I said when I first saw it, I called it the Snowflakes Bill of Rights.
Interesting.
As far as quitting organizations, I'm going to make everybody mad again. I used to be a member of the American Legion when I was in the military. American Legion is a veterans group, and they severely were against burning the American flag. They wanted to make a constitutional amendment to stop burning the American flag. They said this is un-American, whatever it's. And I said, well, as a dues-paying member, I'm going to quit because while I would never burn a flag, I think it's free speech, and I quit. Of course, they didn't care. Now, if I haven't pissed off everybody yet, I'll piss them off now. I'm now a member of the American Legion again. Not because of the flag, because I get parking next door.
How dare you, Ron? How dare you?
Sometimes you gotta do.
All right, well, let's get to the...
Yeah. You can keep up the fight, you know? You can work from the inside.
Work from the inside, yeah. Yeah, no thanks. I need the parking.
You sold out.
So
Some things are more important.
Are they still pushing to get the flag burning amendment or whatever?
I don't know what they're up to. I don't know. I just pay my dues.
Just
I don't know.
park your car. Well, one of the...
Park my car.
I just have to say regarding the photo bill of rights that this is like a very American thing in the sense that you guys know the implications of these guidelines and these suggestions in the US, but it's very different in the rest of the world. I mean, you guys associate it with the left, and I like, for me, it doesn't even, it's not even a discussion. I mean, I read a lot of about American politics because, I mean, most of the media I work with are from the US, but all the implications they're not close to my heart. And some of my friends from the collective I belong to, that's called Ayun, and of Women Photograph Organization, really support this photo bill of rights. And I mean, it's weird, but I stand by them as a person, and I support them, you know. But it's an American thing. It doesn't affect all the other international women photograph members.
How would you say the situation is for you in Caracas as a freelancer?
I mean, my editors have been very, how do you say that? They have been very attentive to me being here. But I am a freelance photographer, so they have no responsibility over me. So, I mean, and also, like, the conditions of working here as a Venezuelan photojournalist in a local news media are, like, so much worse. The payment and the political implications of a polarized society. So it's a different discussion, and it is in most of Latin America.
Well, let's go ahead and piggyback off that and talk about, you know, photojournalists and whatnot under attack, photographers under attack. You know, I brought up this story because this is the one that came up, you know, first in sort of the news feed regarding, you know, a Louisville protest shooting. There was a victim, a 27-year-old photographer. Now, they don't say he was like a photojournalist or worked for a newspaper, so my guess he was, you know, maybe just someone who was a, you know, photographer. In fact, his bio says he's a photographer, and he just is a photographer. He doesn't say he's a photojournalist or anyone. But again, he's someone with a camera who was at a protest, who was targeted by someone and shot and killed, right? And so that might be a sort of general take on it. But we've seen this, if you've been, you know, if you're friends with anybody on Facebook who is like a prominent visual journalist, there's a few friends I know, you know, you see that, you know, more and more they're getting sort of either accosted or blocked. I mean, Evelyn, you talked about it last week where you know, someone tried to block you from taking a picture, but it seems more and more, at least from what I can see, you know, from the distance, it's that it's more aggressive. it's more in your face. It's more like they're just confident in your ability not to cover their image or take their picture. And, throw it over to you, Andrea, first. Is there anything going on in Caracas that's like, tied to the sort of the Black Lives Matter protests or the protests in general? Are there, anybody protesting in Caracas or protests in general? And are you covering that? And sort of what's sort of their sort of take in response to you as a photojournalist in, covering their protest?
I've covered a lot of protests here. They're quite different from the US from what I've seen and from what I've heard from friends that have covered here and there. Here it's different because there's a lot of bullets flying around. It's like it's not it's a different scenario. But we haven't had any protests since the quarantine started because there's no gas. I mean, all the counties are closed, and so it's difficult to move around. It's very restricted and very controlled. So the government has achieved what they wanted in regards of the control that they want to have over the population, because they are very autocratic government. So they are achieving it. People aren't protesting. So and also people, they're just trying to solve the everyday problems of not having running water, not having enough food, not having gas, not having like light, electricity in their homes. So it's difficult to protest in those conditions if you're not comfortable.
They need some of the higher Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They need some of those higher up ones first before they get down to protesting for equal pay or rights or whatnot. Okay. But you said you have covered protests. What have the protests been about? Have they been about those core issues, or what specifically? And how has sort of been the response to you as a photojournalist at those protests?
So when I covered the protests in 2017, they were anti-government protests because they did like a coup d'état from the Supreme Court to the National Assembly, because the National Assembly was opposition majority, so they wanted to obliterate it. So I covered it, and depending on who I decided to stick with during the protest, things became either more dangerous or less dangerous. If I usually try to be between the protesters and the military. And I thought that was the correct place to be. That's what they tell you in security training for journalists, those events. And but the last time I was in one of those, well, not the last time, but one of the last times, I got hit by the police with a tear gas canister, and it broke my hand. It looked like a cornflake, like a mushed cornflake. But fortunately, I'm okay. I have my hand, and it's fine. But I think it depends on how you move and if you're very, very alert, and if you don't get cocky. So the protesters, sometimes they didn't want me to shoot their faces, which is, I understand. They don't want to be identified by the government because there would be really serious implications. Some of them have gone to prison. Some of them have disappeared. So I understand. And I try to be very careful about that. But, it's also, I mean, there's no accountability here with the government. So it's a different scenario. So I understand, and I try to shoot mostly people with their faces covered because they already have them covered because of the tear gas. They had like bandanas and, masks. And they understood, that I had to do my job because I explained.
Yeah, I mean, there's an inherent risk to going out to protesting. I mean, protesting like here in the United States is perfectly legal. It's authorized under the First Amendment. It's your right. And, but people who, have problems with protesting, there's a fear. If they fear protesting, well, they have to take that chance to go out and protest, right? I mean, you got to fight for your rights. Noah, have you been covering any of the protests in your area?
Oh, yeah. Did a lot of straight coverage of the protests here. It's been really dangerous. It's been more of a matter of how many frames can you get out without getting robbed or attacked, more than how good can your photos be. I mean, it was like the purge out here with the looting and the attacks. The first night, 4 of my friends were robbed in Oakland of their gear. 2 of them who I was, 30 yards away, and we just split up. So yeah, it's really become more, less like that you can go out there and work on your art, and more like what you can do without getting killed, or not killed, but without getting attacked and robbed, which is unfortunate. So yeah, it's pretty bad.
And, I mean, obviously, are you getting a lot of people who are, telling you not to photograph them or blocking you and stuff like that as well?
Yeah, it's definitely ramping up a lot more. At least out here, I feel like that started with Occupy. That was a new thought during Occupy in 2012 or 13 of this is our space. We have a right to say no photos. And there are kind of two categories of that. There's the category of no photos of the looters, and then there's the category of we own this space. We're going to tell you what to do. And unlike Venezuela, like people here say, we're going to face repercussions for doing this, but really you're not going to in the U.S. unless you're breaking a law. There are not too many people going to jail for standing out with a protest sign, unlike, what Andrea's seeing that down there. And I find that whole argument very disingenuous, that it's for their safety, and, I don't buy into that. In the U.S.
In the U.S.
Obviously, China, Venezuela, a lot of places that's
absolutely different. I was watching a street photographer the other day talk about his sort of, the way he does his work, right? And he talked about how he's gone from, carrying around a giant DSLR with a backpack full of lenses to essentially scaling down to the most minimalist kit he can, which is like the equivalent of a point-and-shoot camera and one lens. Has there been any thought, especially as these protests and protesters have gotten perhaps more cognizant and aware of what a photographer looks like, to perhaps scale down and go with something less obvious?
I stopped using a flash, obviously, years ago at protests. I'm a really tall, white dude. I'm not going to blend in with people no matter what I do. So for me, it's not. I do travel a lot lighter now, and I do use mirrorless, which helps for not making the noise a little bit. But I'm not really going incognito. Other people could have that option, but for me, it isn't.
And the premise of being incognito too is like a little bit antithetical to what we do. Yeah. I always identify myself as a journalist. I want to look like a journalist. I want to never seem like I'm sneaking anything. I really just try to be as open as possible, and this is my role here at this event. And I don't think my role, yeah, I mean, you don't want to stand out so you get robbed, like with all the equipment, that's different. But, the idea of we're going to look like journalists, and we should look like journalists.
We shouldn't have to kowtow or change the way we do our job because of other people.
Right.
I think it's an interesting, I hear that too, but I think if I had the opportunity to blend in a way that didn't, just as I always practice at protests, I keep my press pass inside my shirt most of the time. And then when I'm in a police situation, I pull it out, but I'm not advertising that I'm press. That's what most of us out here do.
I do the opposite.
What do you mean? You keep it out?
If I'm near the police, I put the press pass inside my shirt.
Interesting.
That's funny. That's really funny. Yeah, the reverse here. So
Evelyn,
I'm the opposite. I put my badge on because I just feel like strongly that I want to be clear, like this is why I'm taking your photo, or this is but I don't feel like I don't have an issue. I don't feel like there's not the issue of hiding it or disclosing it because of the police, but when I'm with the people, I don't know. I don't know if that's useful or not, but my attitude is just to be like, this is who I am. You can see my name, you can see who I work for or freelance, and I'm not trying to anybody else.
At the end of the day, is the objective to say I'm a journalist, or to get a partisan photo? So
that's a fair.
So whether you represent yourself as a journalist or not, it's the end product that you're representing. That photo, that's the most important thing. That's non-biased.
Right. That's a great debate. Like, which way do you achieve that? And so that's worthwhile to think about as well.
I think really.
No, Andrea, you were about to say something.
Yes. So I think that people really appreciate clarity. If you go to a place and you explain yourself to the people there, and even if you belong to an organization that they don't support or whatever, they do appreciate the time you're taking to explain what you're there for and what you're doing and what it means.
Yeah, I think it goes city by city, obviously country by country. I think maybe DC, you haven't quite seen the hostility that we see nightly at the protests, where
Right.
there's no level of them wanting to respect your position because you've explained it or say who you work for. It's our streets, our streets. We're going to, take that card if you pick up your camera. So here it's not really much of a dialogue. I used to give out my card to people who were upset at protests and be like, hey, when we're not all heated, why don't you give me a call and we'll get coffee and talk about what this is, which now I think we're past that point. I don't, sadly. But
Yeah,
I think it's city by city here.
I'm sorry to hear
It's still
that.
peaceful here. We don't have that problem here. Hawaiians are pretty mellow. I mean, they're protesting a little bit, especially the native Hawaiians with sacred lands and things like that. It's getting a little bit heated. But as far as toward the press, they want the recognition. Yes, please take our picture and put it in the paper because that's why we're here. We're protesting so people can see us. So that's what when you guys talk about protesters don't want their pictures taken, I don't understand why. Why are you protesting?
Well, here's the argument of why some protesters don't want their pictures taken, because in a day and time where social media is so rampant and people are quick to react to certain things, they might be scared that, oh my God, my employer is going to see me out here protesting and they're going to take a stance and fire me tomorrow because they saw my face out protesting and lending voice to that. And we see how quickly some of these people that are reacting in certain situations have been fired, have been let go, have been ostracized by the community, have been have people protest their house. So that's part of the reason why people maybe not want their photo taken, because of the repercussions of it on social media.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's absolutely a risk for some people to protest, but doesn't that boil down to personal responsibility? Aren't they taking the stance and position to go out and protest, knowing that? I mean, why go out there?
But their lives shouldn't be ruined because of social media nowadays. Because you stand up for something, why it's okay that they risk the potential of losing their life because of social media? No, I don't think that's fair. You can stand with people in solidarity and say, I believe in this matter. But just because a certain community you live in doesn't believe in it,
there are so many ways to support organizations that fight for rights. But let's go to you, Noah.
Oh yeah, I want to talk. Are you talking about Black Lives Matter protesters who are facing repercussions?
No, there have been. It's the flip side. The people that actually kind of talking out against Black Lives Matter, that their lives are ruined. And I don't agree with what they say, and pulling guns out and repercussions of that. And I don't. But it's First Amendment right to actually say some of that stuff. But they'll get rocks through the windows. They'll get and part of you wants that, but it's not right.
Gotcha. I thought we were talking about Black Lives Matter, and I'm like, I don't think
it's actually the flip side is that the people that are actually kind of doing the wrong thing, but it's their voice to be able to do that.
Well, I hope you all are safe out there, no matter what you're covering, whether it be protests or otherwise. And that actually feeds into our last topic this evening, which we'll just jump to right now. And this is basically about a staff photographer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, a Mr. Michael Santiago, who essentially took a buyout from his newspaper because he felt that there were issues of racism within the newsroom. And it kind of stems from essentially his viewpoints and opinions on what was going on with regard to the Black Lives Matter protests and whatnot. And the paper saying that, hey, you can't cover protests because, you have this, I guess, bias or you have this sort of, these are your opinions about it and, we don't want you to cover this. So then he left the paper. This is an interesting sort of thing that I've seen in not only this instance, but others where people are getting sort of called out for things that they've posted, and it's now affecting them in their sort of personal lives and their job lives. And, for you all who cover this stuff on a regular basis, even though you're freelancers, are you concerned at all about what you put out there in social media and other platforms because of how you think editors will look at that? Noah, you were nodding yes. Yeah,
for sure. Although the story that you sent is a little different. I think from what Michael did and from what the original reporter did, because it wasn't exactly for putting their political views out there. I mean, hers was kind of a very light joke about this is the crowd after a country music concert, not after a protest, which I'm a very firm believer in not putting out your political opinions on social if you're a journalist. But I don't think either. I mean, all he did was voice support for her, and I think her offense, unless there's more to it than I'm reading, her offense of putting up that photo and saying this was actually after a concert isn't really a political statement. It was, a very light thing. So I don't know. That whole story confused me, and then there was talk about it just being an excuse to get rid of him because the publisher is conservative. But I wouldn't say, from what I've read, either of them did something violating that line of journalism ethics and sharing your opinion.
I mean, it's a valid point, because I mean, we share our opinions on this program all the time. We share opinions. I'm sure you've shared. I've shared my opinions on Facebook and whatnot. And there was a recent story, I think, about someone, lieutenant colonel in the military, or somebody who was a veteran, and she was getting called out because of that, because of her thoughts in response to a story. So it's like, even the things you say in public or private, amongst your Facebook groups. Nothing, of course, is ever private, though, if you post it online. But again, I mean, whether or not there's a direct line of correlation between, the person's firing and, sort of their or leaving the position and this post, do you take in consideration more about what you say and post online, or do you post, you don't care about that sort of thing? That's open to anyone. Does anyone take into consideration or worry about what they post because of their potential ties to newspapers or publications or what they do?
Oh, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I try to steer clear of voicing personal opinion. What I found interesting in the article, so I was just reading when you asked that question, was that it sounded like he was banned from covering the protest, and I was unclear if he was banned from covering the protest because he was black or because he had gotten, not punished, I mean, be the right word, but for defending his colleague's tweet and was on some sort of like administrative
That's how I
leave.
interpret it. It was defending the colleague's tweet.
So then because then I thought, wow, that's really like, or then you're not allowed to cover a story. Like, it's like recusing yourself from some implied bias. And I think that would be like impossible for journalists in newsrooms to, I mean, it would affect all of us no matter what. Like, if you're white and you're covering a white guy, if you're black, you're covering a black, I mean, that would seem impossible. So.
Evelyn, what did you think about the reporter's photo tweet, about the litter? Did you think that was over any ethical line or no?
Yeah, I was just looking at that too, and I think that I would like to see the photo, but no, I mean, it's sort of a joke. I think it does. It walks a fine line, and I think that because we are in this like heightened sense of identity, and clearly, I think there's an implication of the types of people who go to a Kenny Chesney concert and the types of people that are looters, and she's saying that, which I think is fair and observant as a journalist. I don't think that would be, to me, like a fireable, I don't know if she was fired, a fireable offense, but I think it's it's like on the cusp. It was accurate, probably, and fun, and sort of said with a sense of humor, because there's an implication that you see, I need to see the photo, but she's implying that you see some trashed up scene and you're going to assume that they're looters and that those looters are black. And she's saying, no, this is a country music concert, right? That's what that's the point she's trying to convey. And that's her job, I guess, as a journalist. But she said it in a sort of jokey way, and she called out race. Is that too political? That's a tough call to make. I mean, yeah.
It's certainly less political than we have come together alongside the movement to fight police brutality and systematic racism. So it's definitely a lot less political than that.
That she's making an observation, and she's using current societal thinking as a journalist that, to say, hey, like, this is the way the group think is happening, but no, this is the reality of the situation. And was it really a Kenny Chesney concert tailgate? I mean, is that a fact? So
I don't think anyone's been fired, so to say. I think they're just not cover. They're not being sent out to cover protests. You know, they're like saying, okay, well, you have these feelings, and we see a perceived bias here, so you know we don't want to send you out because we don't believe you have a sort of, you're not going to cover this event impartially. And so in that case, you're going to go cover the sports team, or go feature hunting, or whatever they send you to do in a newsroom nowadays. Go photograph people sitting on porches. I mean, that's very popular, right? Which, by the way, brings me up. How is Caracas doing with regard to COVID, Andrea? You guys doing all right?
Wow. So, yeah, Latin America is becoming the hotspot for COVID, especially Brazil, and we share frontier with Brazil. A lot of Venezuelan migrants are coming back through Brazil and through Colombia carrying the virus, and they are being quarantined in places near the border. And they are like in very, very bad conditions. And the people that weren't infected now are infected, and the numbers are rising. They expect the peak to be in September. But this is a country with a collapsed healthcare system. So it's like the perfect storm for the virus. And I mean, my dad is a leukemia patient, and I'm like very afraid for him because he has no defenses. And I'm afraid for anyone that gets the virus here. But people here in Latin America, in Venezuela, they can't stop working because they work for the day. What they earn is what they eat. So it's difficult to get them to stay quarantined, to not go out, because they are more afraid of hunger, which is a familiar phase. It has been for the last 10 years, for the last 5 years, than of the virus, which is like a ghost that we don't know, we don't understand, we don't know anything about it. So it's not good.
The options are don't work and don't eat and die of hunger, or work and maybe get a disease and a virus and whatnot. In general, how are you keeping safe while covering and doing your work and doing your job?
So at the beginning of the quarantine, I assisted a lot of talks and conferences and workshops regarding hygiene protocols for covering COVID. But I guess they are changing because they're discovering new things about the virus and how it infects people. So I'm trying to stay on top of it, on top of the research, so that I know what I can do and what I shouldn't. And of course, I'm doing a lot of social distancing with my family. They don't understand. For them, the virus is like, whatever. But I think I understand it better than them. And I'm trying to keep my distance, even if they don't want me to. My family is very close. So they're like, why don't you come for breakfast every day? And I'm like, no, I'm not coming. I just went there for Mother's Day, for Father's Day. And I was like, sitting on another table, washing my own stuff, washing my hands 1,000 times, wearing a face mask, and yeah, they were like, "You're ridiculous," and I'm like, "No."
You can't point to the statistics and be like, "Family, look, people are dying in our country. Don't you understand?"
I mean, it's just that we see things different here. Things for us are just facts. They're a mix of spiritual and facts and what you feel. It's just not, facts are not the most important thing. It's weird.
I can't imagine anywhere else where that might be the same thing happening. Must be only in Caracas. I can't imagine anywhere else. Not like Florida or Texas. But anyways, Noah, how are you holding up with the COVID going on? What's your status over there?
So apparently negative so far. It's been interesting. I've turned down a bunch because my wife is very worried about this, and I've kind of given her ultimate decision over assignments. And some of the things have been really hard to turn down. Like I turned down an assignment to go into a COVID ward at our big hospital here when it was going strong, and that's and nobody had been in at that time to shoot it. You were seeing, the New York Times had done it, but very few other places had done that. And I would have loved to do that, but it would have meant 3 weeks of not being home when, she would have kicked me out for 3 weeks. So I've turned that down. I've turned down other shoots, like being in a house with somebody who had tested positive previously, assignments like that. Then there's some that are uncomfortable, but I do, like, you know, the protests where you're jammed in with 10,000 people. There was one that I shot half an hour. I did okay in that half an hour, and I said, you know, I think I'm out of here. Like, I got what I needed, whereas normally you would work that harder. But that's probably the most uncomfortable I've gotten, is besides for the times when I need to go to the bathroom and you can't find a bathroom anymore when you're working. But besides for that, you know, being jammed in with those protest crowds is a little bit worrying. But again, like, the hardest thing has been turning down things that I would have done in a minute if I was single, but I can't really do it with the family.
Thing. I take that and think about that all the time, you know, because I still go into the office every day. I mean, it's obviously a lot different here. It's a lot safer, but, you know, even still at the heart of it, when we were seeing, you know, hundreds of cases a day, I was very worried myself about even going out to work, you know, and I didn't want to bring it back to my family, who were hunkering down and staying safe. Evelyn, with regard to the protests, are you back to covering that after you've you know, done moving? Are you done moving, by the way? You done fully unpacking and everything?
Yes, I moved.
Okay.
I've not fully unpacked. I haven't stopped working. No, I mean, I pretty much try to get out there even when I'm not on assignment almost every day. I feel very attached to the story.
Taking a break with the move?
4th of July.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, I took a break just because I had to, like with movers and stuff, but then I tried to jump back into it. And, you know, I worked 4th of July, you know, Saturday all day, and then I didn't work yesterday. Today, you know, I may poke my head down to Black Lives Matter Plaza. We'll just see how it goes. So yeah, I'm just trying to find a balance, but I would keep my work is continuing because the movement actually, like, it's amazing. I mean, it like keeps finding like new life. I mean, it starts to go down. It's like a fire, I guess. No, and then like somebody breathes a little bit of life back into it, and then there's like a whole nother wave. And I have to say, covering 4th of July was really fascinating. I mean, I almost only ever cover 4th of July as like this patriotic American holiday, and I cover a parade or barbecue or fireworks. And this was like the most controversial, diverse, fascinating 4th of July I've ever experienced. And it wasn't just because people were protesting, but it was that I sort of got like how many different experiences Americans have on this holiday and their attitudes toward this holiday. And of course, there's also conflict in Washington, D.C. And I will say also, almost everyone's wearing masks during the protests, but on 4th of July, a lot of people came into town that were not part of Black Lives Matter protests, and they were not wearing masks. And the National Park Service was giving out masks, and people who came to celebrate in a patriotic fashion, I'm just going to blanket stereotype, were barely wearing masks. Yeah. And that was a little bit more scary. I mean, I had a mask on, but yeah. It was quite a polarizing day. Let's say, you know.
Yeah, I watched the president's speech at Mount Rushmore, and I didn't see many masks in that audience. But you know.
Right. Yeah.
Did anybody else pick up on the using Neil Diamond's "We're Coming to America" during the display? I couldn't quite figure out if that was trolling or if it was. I was
4D
really
chess,
confused
Noah.
by that.
4D chess. That's all I gotta say.
I gotta listen for that.
4D chess. You haven't heard that?
Huh?
You haven't had no? Okay. We'll talk about it after. I'm sure they celebrated American independence very highly in Caracas, Andrea, right? Did you barbecues and burgers and brats and Barbie?
For sure.
Ron, how was your 4th of July celebration? Did you guys any protests or anything? Any COVID? Did you guys all breathe on each other in a small room or anything over there?
We did. We breathed in a small room together.
I hear the first person who gets COVID gets a prize, right? That's what they're no. That's that.
We've had. I'm making up numbers here, but it's something like 20 people have died in Hawaii from COVID since it began. Yeah.
Helps
but we shut down the state. Yeah. What's that? Who said something?
Oh, I said it helps to be on an island.
Right. We shut down the island so that people can't come here.
How'd that work?
And if they, it worked for who?
How'd that work for Manhattan? Never mind. The joke about being in that.
Shopee. We have a 14-day quarantine here if you want to come and visit. Noah, Andrea, I got a spare room. But unfortunately, you will spend 14 days in that room because if you leave, my neighbors will tell on you.
Oh, my God. Travis, I know New York City is recently opened up, or New York State relaxed some restrictions. Have you been able to get out and about more in New York?
I mean, it depends where you are. I mean, New Yorkers have been out. It's the different levels of opening, and certainly New York City is slower to open up than the rest of the state. And there's certain areas, New York is kind of a mix of having gone through it and being a hotspot so early on that it was, very kind of eye-opening and awakening to kind of have those levels where the rest of America wasn't having those levels, and now that the rest of America is having those levels, and New York is starting to level off. It's this weird thing of where people are starting to go stir crazy and want to go out and do stupid stuff like street parties and stuff like that, and then kind of go back. It's like people want to return to normal, but can't return to normal. And when you see the rest of America, and it's funny, you look at the outlining map of the United States, like all the coastal states now are bright red, and it's just kind of crazy that when you look at the rest of the world that is on a decline, that we're actually going higher than we've ever been at any point during this. So it's scary. I in New York right now, I'm lucky I'm about an hour outside of the city. I do some work in the city, and when I've had to go there, I actually, it's very strange to go back to work in the city and shoot and wear a mask and try and social distance and do different things. It just feels, the gravity of shooting now is very, very different. Where when I'm back up at my house, I have a pond and land, and I can walk out and sunbathe and play music outside and run around and not worry about social distancing. And I've never had an issue of going to a grocery store here and waiting on lines or anything like that. You can kind of go in, everybody's wearing a mask. It's not like, like, oh my God, yeah. But I think people are starting to get really. You had this long period of people like, all right, how long is this going to last if we do this and stuff like that? And now, especially in the photo industry and the people I work with and all the people that are around me and American photographic artists and the stuff I've been outreaching to are actually going through a second huge depression now, because I think we're seeing that the industry has fundamentally changed. We don't know when we're coming out of it. We don't know what the new norm is going to be. And there's a great fear that America's just taking the wrong route in this, and it's going to get worse and things are going to get closed down again. And it's very scary at the moment for people.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we're going to end the show on that high note.
No.
No. But
has anyone seen Warrior Nun on Netflix? No, let's go.
Dark. That new show, Dark. The German show, Dark.
That's the final season. Yeah, it's good.
All right. Well, Andrea, tell our audience where they can find more about you and your work.
Sure. They could find me on Instagram, Andrea Hernández Briseño. And they can also find me on the Women Photograph database. What else? So I just formed with a Chilean friend a collective of women photographers working in Latin America called Ayun Fotógrafas, and it's like so.
Great.
Yeah,
send me
that's
the
my
link
plugin.
to that, and I'll make sure to post it on the show notes. Noah, where can people find out more about you and your work?
I'm not going to tell them. If they want to hire me, they have to work hard and figure it out.
There you go. I like that. It's the
attitude.
Yeah. How badly do you want me?
Instead of my website plug, I will actually plug Andrea's work. The COVID isolation stuff was gorgeous, so I will plug your work instead. There.
Oh, thanks, Noah. That's wonderful.
All right, great. Well, you'll be able to find Noah's link in our show notes if you really want him that badly, or just Google him. He's on the Google machine. All right, Ron, you got anything for us before we sign off?
Aloha.
Aloha. Evelyn?
Just keeping at it. I'll be covering the protests as they continue to evolve. Yep.
Keep on rocking in the free world. All right. Travis?
My show Open Talk returns this coming Thursday, and we have a fantastic guest, Samantha Isom, who is founder of Brown Passport, and she's has put a wonderful series together on traveling and what it's like to be a Black person in America and the world traveling as a Black person, and those conversations and stuff like that, which is one of the very interesting projects he's working on. A bunch of other stuff. So we delve. Open Talk is now kind of morphed into Inside the Actors Playhouse for photographers. So it's a nice long delve into where she started, her roots, and where she's at now, and the state of the world. So that's you can find us on American Photographic Artists channel on YouTube, and that'll be premiering on 7 p.m. on Thursday.
All right, 7 p.m. Thursday. Great. All right, well, I think that's going to bring us to the end of this week's show. If you'd like to carry on the conversation, you can find us on all our social media channels, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and most importantly, Patreon. If you'd like to support the show financially, throw us a bone. $1 will get you access to everything we do, early access and all that fun stuff. So go to that. And if you want to get links to all the stuff we talked about, to include our show notes and our social media, go to aroundthelens.com, and you'll find all of that there. All right, well, thank you, Noah. Thank you, Andrea. Truly appreciate you all taking time and getting up bright and early for us in this show. I truly appreciate it. Noah, go to bed, get some rest, take a break, relax. Evelyn, Travis, your day just started. You just got great in the morning, great in the day.
I'm going straight from this to recording a new episode of Open Talk right after this.
Oh my gosh! Wow. And Ron, go back to bed. Go back to bed, Ron. It's early. Just go back to bed. All right. Thanks you all so much, guests and co-hosts. I truly appreciate all of your time. For Around the Lens, episode 232, I am David J. Murphy, and we are out.
Thanks for listening to Around the Lens. We hope you enjoyed the show. To continue the conversation, head on over to one of our social media outlets such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter. To support the show financially, consider donating to us via Patreon. For show notes from this week's episode and links to everything else we talked about, just go to our website, aroundthelens.com. Finally, if you or someone you know might be a good guest for the show, get in touch with us via email at info@aroundthelens.com.